This morning has been spectacular for 1,000 reasons, but one of the prominent reasons is it's a generational love fest. You have grandparents and grandchildren who are just on the same page. You have a grandfather and a grandson doing a bar mitzvah together. You have a grandfather and a grandson on Zoom from Albany to Newton for years. You have multiple generations in the same place. That's how it should be. Parents and children in the same place. That's how it should be. Grandparents and grandchildren in the same place. That's how it should be. We dream about it. We sing about it. L'dor v'dor. But what happens when that doesn't happen? And it's not happening. Outside the Rabbi Chill Sanctuary this morning, there's a problem I want to tackle that is real, painful, common, and coming soon to a Thanksgiving table near you. What happens when parents and children and grandparents and grandchildren disagree passionately about Israel? Now, this is not a new problem. This is an old problem. We've known about this problem for a long time. But what's new about this old problem is the urgency of this problem since October 7th and Israel's war to try to get rid of Hamas so that October 7th never happens again. And as the war continues, and as the horrific images are on our screens and in our newspapers and on our television sets every day and every night, and as Israeli soldiers are dying, and as Gaza civilians are dying, the latent differences between the generations get exacerbated. And I know about this and I see it because there's a new genre of email or text or phone call that I have been getting since October 7th, and it comes from you, it comes from Temple Emmanuel, and it is not uncommon. When I hear, "Rabbi, I need to see you today," I know what it's about. "Rabbi, I need to see you today. I just found out that my son is at a rally to pressure Israel to accept a ceasefire when Hamas won't be destroyed." Oh my God, what do I say? What do I do? "Rabbi, I need to see you today. I just learned that my daughter is calling senators. My daughter is calling representatives to force Israel, to impose on Israel a ceasefire. Rabbi, what do I say? What do I do?" And what do we do when that spirited disagreement comes to our Thanksgiving table? Now, there is no one answer, of course, that is right for every family. But this is a problem that is shared by many families. And this morning, I wanted to offer you 3 different models for how to think about it. Each model has pros and cons, and each family can figure out which model works best for it. The first model is just to go there. Talk about it. Talk about Israel and Gaza. Talk honestly. The younger generation makes its case, and the older generation makes its case. And there's a lot of value to that. People who love each other are talking honestly about what matters. And if that conversation is had with respect, then that feels like a very Jewish move, a principled disagreement. But there are two problems, two cons with going there and talking about it. Number one, you all know this, but there's no convincing. Neither side can convince the others. It's not like you can pick some new fact. It's not like you can cite some article. It's not like you can download a podcast. Oh, just listen to Barry Weiss's interview with Condoleezza Rice. And they'll say, oh my God, I never knew. You know what? You're right, and I've been wrong. I thank you for that podcast. That never happens. It's an excellent podcast, by the way, but it doesn't convince because facts, podcasts, articles don't convince. Which leads to the second problem with the honest conversation. It hurts. It is painful. People are so deeply convicted about Israel that it's impossible to have a conversation about Israel in a clinical, antiseptic, unemotional way. It's emotional. And it doesn't take very long for it to get real and raw. Son or daughter, who are you? Who are you that after all of those trips to Israel, who are you that after all of those hours of Jewish education, who are you? We've had family, our own family, die in the Shoah. Who are you? We have family and friends living in Israel on the front lines. Who are you that you don't have instinctive sympathy for the Jewish state and a desire to protect the Jewish people? Mom and Dad, who am I? I'll tell you exactly who I am. I'm the person you raised. I'm the person who took the values you taught me. I'm the person you raised. I have a different question, Mom and Dad. Who are you? Where did you go? Mom and Dad, can I have the parents back who raised me? Where did you go? Mom and Dad, didn't you have like seders every year for decades? And wasn't the theme of those seders every year for decades, God protects the vulnerable? We should protect the vulnerable. And I get that the Israeli Jews who were murdered on October 7th is a moral atrocity. I get that. It's a moral atrocity. It's evil. Full stop. Here's what I don't understand, Mom and Dad. Why don't you care about all the dead Gazans who are civilians? Why don't you see? Why don't you care? Just like you don't see it, where are you? So it gets real and it gets raw, and that's enough to take the holiday cheer out of the holiday. Which leaves us with a second option. Here's the second option. We just agree we're not going to talk about Israel. It's a hot potato. It's not going to talk about Israel. And we all agree that we disagree about Israel. We all agree that because we disagree about Israel, we're just not going to talk about Israel. Ground rule. Now, there's a big plus to that. You don't have the unproductive and unpleasant and painful who are you, where are you, oh my God conversation. That's good. There's a big downside though. What does it mean that people who love each other can't actually talk about what matters most? Isn't that kind of sad? That you're with your parents and children, grandparents and grandchildren. It's Thanksgiving. Isn't it kind of sad that you can't talk about what matters most with your own family? Got to talk about what's with the NBA and this new series they have. You got to talk about irrelevancy because you can't go there. So the first two models are pretty tough. So I want to offer you a third model. We don't agree about Israel, and the generations don't agree about Israel. But can we all be inspired by the courage and valor and strength of Israel's citizen soldiers who are fighting this war to keep the state of Israel alive and who are putting their lives on the line? Can we all be inspired, for example, by Matanya ben Sofit? So Matanya ben Sofit is a young Israeli. Members of Temple Emmanuel have actually met him because he works with Micha Goodman at Beit Prad in Jerusalem. He's Micha's right-hand person. And there's this iconic photo of Matanya ben Sofit the day before he goes to Gaza. And he's dressed in his army clothing. And he is holding his baby daughter, Ya'ara, an army, a soldier, a war, a father and a daughter, giving her a kiss. And the next day, he would leave his wife, Re'ut. He would leave his daughter, Ya'ara. He would leave his home. He would leave his hearth. He would leave his security to go in a tank in Gaza. And as you know, tanks are exceptionally vulnerable to anti-tank missiles. Now, can we just pause here? Can we just stop here? Can we just take a moment to ask ourselves what it would be like to be Matanya ben Sofit? What kind of courage does it take? What kind of idealism does it take? What kind of strength does it take? What kind of commitment to something larger than yourself does it take to leave all that you love behind, to go into a tank in Gaza? Well, the next day he went into a tank in Gaza, and his tank was hit by anti-tank missiles. He's the commander of the tank. 2 soldiers in that tank died. Matanya ben Yosef was rescued from a burning tank by a medic. The medic, turns out, also studied at Beit Prad. And the medic rescued Matanya, and he is now recovering badly hurt in a hospital, so young, so idealistic, so scarred. Now, Matanya believes in something larger than himself. He is willing to fight for something larger than himself. If necessary, he is willing to die for something larger than himself. And that is that the Jewish people have a right to a Jewish homeland in Eretz Yisrael, where we can live free and secure and unafraid. He will die if necessary to make sure that October 7th never happens again. And here's the remarkable thing. His story is so powerful, obviously. What's also so powerful is that there are 360,000 citizen soldiers of Israel who are doing their version of that story. There are 360,000 citizen soldiers who are leaving their spouse. They are leaving their children. They are leaving their parents who do not sleep, who cannot sleep. Their parents who are hysterical. They don't know how to make it through the day. My son is in Gaza, I can't hear from them. My daughter is in Gaza, I can't hear from them. My son is up north with Hezbollah. My daughter is up north with Hezbollah, I can't hear from them. I don't have access to them. Can you imagine? What do you do? How do you get through the day? And these soldiers do that. Not to mention they leave their rituals, they leave their bed, they leave their shower, they leave their cup of coffee, and they do all of this. And 360,000 citizen soldiers do this knowing that they don't know if they'll be alive at the end of the war. They do this knowing that they don't know if they'll ever see their spouse again. They do this knowing that they don't know will they ever kiss their child again. They do this knowing that they don't know will they ever be in their bed again. Maybe they'll die. And yet, they are highly motivated to fight this war in the face of that, because that's how deeply they believe that Israel has a right to exist, that the Jewish people have a right to a homeland, and they will fight for that with their very life. Now, what does this mean to us and to the painful generational divide and to our Thanksgiving table? Something different is asked of American Jews than it is of Israeli Jews. Israeli Jews are asked to fight and, if necessary, to die. And it is true that there are American Jews who fight for our armed forces and the prayer for our country. We had a rich and robust crowd of our members who fight for our country. And it's not just in historic times. We have children today. We have sons today. We have daughters today who had their bar mitzvah here, who had their bat mitzvah here, who are in the armed forces and are in harm's way. That does happen. But for the most part, American Jews in civilian life are not asked to die for something. We have a different question. What are we willing to live for? What are we willing to fight for? What are we willing to sacrifice for that is larger than ourselves? And if we cannot answer that question in a meaningful way now, that is an opportunity for some spiritual growth. And that is a good conversation around your Thanksgiving table. As for Matanya Ben Sofit, in the hospital, we asked his wife if we could share his story. And she said, yes, you can share his story, but on one condition, that you would offer a prayer for my husband. My husband needs your prayers. So may God, who is the author of life and health and healing, may God bring a refuah shalema, a full healing, a complete healing to Matanya Ben Sofit. May God bring Matanya to a refuat hanefesh, a healing of soul and refuat haguf, a full and complete healing of his body. May God restore Matanya ben Sofit to health and strength and life. And as for us, and as for all of our generations, may we be inspired by Matanya and by the 360,000 citizen soldiers of Israel to ask ourselves, what is it that we care for and love and would fight for that deeply? William James has taught us that the best use of a life is to spend it on something that will outlast it. What is that for you? Shabbat Shalom.